Hello, this is Colin again. I wanted to share my thoughts on the MAPEX, MAP exercise, a collective level training method. As you can see, I got a couple analog examples of common operating pictures of previous training we've done. The intent here is to continue to share methods and inspire leaders to practice more repetitions. Primary audience again here is the practitioners of war fighting and defense, because I'm going to use specific lingo and resources available to them. As a secondary audience, general war gamers and hobbyists, please, I hope you can take something out of this as well. So here's the overview. What's a MAPEX? A short history of different MAPEXs I've led so far. Why the MAPEX? What a MAPEX is good for. Its structure, tools and resources available. Execution, adjudication. The cons of the MAPEX, its limitations. What next steps might I or somebody else may take this? And then conclusion. Right, here we got one of the pictures I'm kind of proud of during our OCT coaching down at XCTC 2103 at Fort Hood, Texas. Pretty cool. All right, so the MAP exercise. Is it a war game? Is it a tabletop exercise? In Army doctrine, they're in FM 7-0 training. The MAP exercise is a leader and staff training exercise using maps, digital displays for tactical scenarios. This is great. More wordage here. They provide training opportunity, providing commanders a technique to train their staffs in performing essential and controlling functions without deploying the unit. Interestingly enough, the definition of warfighter exercise is kind of expands this to free play against a thinking enemy. So I'm not sure this definition meets exactly what I've developed, but it seems kind of the best. I wouldn't necessarily call it a war game. I wouldn't call it a tabletop exercise. I call it a MAPEX right now. It's all semantics, though. Now, do note, this is not the MDMP wargaming step. I'm not trying to just run through co-analysis and co-comparison. This has its own training objectives, separate from running a battalion, brigade, division level operation. It's kind of similar to the radio rehearsal or the JBCP rehearsal. Now, as kind of some feedback for those who do watch this, if you'd like to jot down in the comments how many radio JBCP rehearsals or even MAPEX exercises, throw that down there. I'm really curious if anybody else has conducted a radio or JBCP rehearsal, because I imagine it's darn nil, like zero. Okay. But anyway, lastly, question. Could VBS3 be used? As you can see here in the video, I attempted that. It's not great. It could be kind of used to practice executing your own plan by yourself if you want. But what I understand, VBS3 wasn't that great. It's not designed for it. It's very clunky. VBS4 has the potential to be a little bit better. Let's keep on going. So a short history of MAP exercises I've run. Formally, I started to try and develop this training methodology since spring of 2020. Informally, I guess I've kind of always been this kind of nerd. Uh, Back during ROTC at University of Louisville, I would generate additional sticks, scenarios, and orders for us to practice, or myself to practice. And then, as the commander of Delta Company, first of the 151 in Indiana, in Lightning Forge 2018 in Hawaii, uh, I put my platoon leaders and XO through kind of a simple MAPEX. And then while we were at JRTC, we conducted a bunch of radio rehearsals in preparation for our missions. Okay, so over here on the right is a list of a bunch of the map exercises I and others have conducted so far. As I said, this really kind of started there around March 2020 with Captain Maris and I sitting down at a table together. I'll kind of explain the potential formats you could use for this later, but we came up with our plans, sat down together, and went through the operation together, trying to flesh out the concept. Most of these are with my OCTs with Operations Group Wolf. Um, as we've used these as a collective level training method. Sergeant Johnson and Levante, we were out there at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, July of 20, and then back home at Camp Atterbury, Sergeant Bull, Sergeant Green, platoon versus platoon movement to contacts. Captain Maris and I came together to do a company versus company movement to contact to help try and flesh out the concept even more. And then that December, my guys and I hosted a battalion tabletop exercise class. It's kind of what we called it at that moment to share with the other companies in the battalion. That next January, we continued Sergeant Little and Johnson, and then Sergeant Fafita and Brandstatter. Starting with them, that was after those exercises of the summer, and where we really started to use this also as an additional opportunity to certify our OCTs. Um, they conducted hot washes and AARs. They filled out the TNDO and yellow card to provide feedback to the guys practicing and to help certify ourselves. Sergeant Ashby and Johnson started to get into really doing mech infantry, combined arms type operations. And then Sergeant Little and I did a company attack again versus a platoon defense. As you can see, I kind of swapped one by accident in February of 2020. We did a historical battle instead of a normal staff ride. Um, Sergeant Rios versus Sergeant Balhadia. They did the battalion attack versus company defense of the Battle of Qashm, the Conoco oil fields in Syria, where Syrian and Wagner forces attacked U.S. forces. That was really interesting to actually do a historical battle, prep the force structures, the TO&Es, order of battle, and kind of see what we would plan and come up with. And then that next month, we actually went on an MTT TDY mission to teach another unit good OCT stuff in preparation for the summer, working together. So they could help coach combat arms units. We use this as a demonstration of how they could possibly practice combat arms operations because they were more combat service support MOSs. There in June, a couple of our guest OCTs who joined us, the lieutenants, I had them fight over a fictional battle at one of the villages we were doing the exercise at to help introduce this concept to more units. And then here this winter, we wrapped up the year with a company attack versus a platoon defense. More mech infantry type of units. So why a MAPEX? I would like to promote and see if you want more information, please go see the collective level and something rotten videos I've posted previously. But in kind of a synopsis, real quick, it's a very similar to my thoughts as an athlete and playing sports growing up. They're always conducted during practices, full team scrimmages, coming together as the full team and scrimmaging against each other. A live opponent, thinking opponent is very important. I'm not really sure that there's enough repetitions built into the Army's training models and schedules to develop and further competence for leaders for collective level operations. This also could be a good method to help combat the Army and its zero defect environment. Just think about it. Um, in many cases, a leader is performing that collective level operation maybe for the first time or first couple times in front of their peers, in front of their subordinates, and in front of their superiors. Now, while this also has a healthy effect of pushing for people to be prepared and to do their best, it's not like they can try new ideas, to experiment, to learn from potential failures in a safe environment where there's not actual real bullets going both ways. There are stark consequences for those who fail in the training environment, especially at JRTCs and stuff, right? Again, compound that with how the Army National Guard doesn't get a lot of repetitions because IDT time is finite. This could be a good method um, to help deconflict that. You're learning on the side, kind of amongst a small group, maybe just peers and a superior who's teaching and doing the white cell and coaching. So it's kind of a little more of a low threat environment for you to learn, to practice, to fuck up and fix yourself, right? That's why I kind of like it. So what's a MAPEX good for, right? What are the literal values, the good tangible outcomes that a leader may gain by doing something like this? They get to practice mission analysis and course of action development. Instead of writing an order to make an order, a lot of young leaders fall into this, right? They're making their orders to have a complete order. In the TNDO and some evaluations, and schoolhouses are designed to see if people can pitch and come up with a complete order. That's important, but it's also a different objective than I am making a plan to go execute on the battlefield. Focusing on the fight is important, and I like to keep important things, keep first things first, important things important. From Stephen Covey and what he thinks. So mission analysis, course of action development. You need time to practice that, to get deep, to know when to simplify things and everything else. Practicing tactical decision making. Some sticks. Live fires don't provide it. Some sticks does. XCTC does. JRTC, NTC does. Force on force opportunities do. This is another opportunity for that. That force on force, like I just said. It can be in a free play, non scripted scenario method. Not even the sticks lanes at XCTC offer that. The CTCs kind of do, but they're still kind of scripted. They also get to practice indirect fire integration at the REDS distance, the risk estimate distances, not the 600-meter range safety distances. I'll tell you a story. I was out there at Northern Strike 22 here in Michigan this past August in 2020. The JTAC I was coaching, the no crap JTAC that was attached to this company on this urban attack. It's like, hey man, what's the reds? How close can you get these fires in for these guys, to match the movement and do echeloning? It's like 600 meters. So like, what are you talking about, man? What's the reds for these weapon systems? Because some of them are a lot closer than 600 meters. You need time and opportunity to practice those to become good at it, to know when you can turn on and off different weapon systems and effects, to keep guys alive and to not give the enemy a single chance. This helps that, I think. Helps you practice the common operating picture and analog battle tracking systems. Whether you're doing that in your kit on the battlefield, you're doing it at a command post, in a Humvee or underneath a Ulcans, or whether you're doing that at a TOC attack, so on and so forth, right? Like you need time and opportunities to develop that skill set too. That's a leader skill set. It really is. Also, developing familiarity to know thyself and know thy potential adversary. Knowing thyself, the force structure, the weapon systems, the doctrine, the attachments. We don't always, platoons don't always get to train with the engineers who would make the breach or assist the breach with them, or, uh, you know, KLE teams, different MP teams, whoever could be attached. You might want to practice that, having that attachment. You might want to imagine, especially as a maneuver leader, what if you get assigned and you have to PCS to a Stryker unit, to a Bradley unit? What if you're working or in charge of a company team with Abrams? You have to practice that to be good at it. And also, non-US force structures, their weapon systems, their doctrine. Because Ovana's weapon systems are a lot different than Denovia's. It's very interesting, actually, how similar to our weapon systems Ovana's is, especially on the more dismounted side. On the mounted side, from the opportunities I've had to do these, I've started to really learn how close to Dovana's those systems are at the mech side, at the armor side. But to know thyself and know thy enemy is important as well. This also can assist with practicing operations that would take a lot of time or resources, or to do operations that usually don't get practiced. There's a lot of additional METs and collective tasks at the platoon, company, battalion, brigade, division level that you may not necessarily go execute until you're at the CTC or until you're at the battlefront, like an actual battle, right? It could be, we always practice combined arms, but maybe you need to practice it in a specific manner. Maybe you should practice follow and assume, because we do a lot of that in the real fight, but we don't necessarily train it a lot until we get to CTCs. What about RPOL? What about delay? What about a lot of things, right? The structure. So, very similar to how the Army generally tries to follow a plan, prepare, execute, and assess model. I've got the scenario development and issuing the order, kind of planning the training event. Then the mission prep. Each team, each side, each person goes and conducts their mission analysis and course of action development. Then we come together and we execute. We stay together and we finish up with an AAR, and then there's any follow-up AARs or TNDOs and feedback we provide it as well. As you can see here on the right-hand side is a picture of kind of what I would tell guys and gals what they could do or use to help assist preparing that, where to reference and kind of point them in the right direction. Okay, tools and resources here to assist. with the development of the exercise and those prepping their missions. Of course, doctrine. Um, Outside of the infantry Bible or combined arms team, there is now an ATP of staff references, a staff reference guide that has a lot of movement, um, identification, speeds, probabilities for soldiers to use, in addition to the IPB manual. You also have your good old outboard and mission planning documents. As you can see here on the right hand side, I have my current products of what I would use or expect for a company operation, every single one of those. Um, there's a couple of duplications. As you can see, the outboard shell is basically a copy of the maneuver Captain's Career Course outboard workbook, just in PDF and big and small formats. But you got your fires, Annex D, a duty log for your battle tracking, draw, if you want to use the formal form, mobility, counter mobility, survival, tools. You've got the general grading rubrics just to kind of spot check and see what type of quality things you could use. You don't have to use those per se. Your recon and surveillance planning products, soldier load analysis, and then the sustainment paragraph pieces. I generally currently use a 1 inch binder with document protectors per operation. And I've got a couple set printed just in case, boss or somebody says, all right, pen and paper, prepare to receive mission. That way you're ready to rock and roll for an operation. You also have Odin. Here's a example site of the 1st Battalion 449 Mech Regiment of, who is this? Olvana. This is, again, an excellent tool by TRADOC G2 for us to start knowing the potential adversaries a little bit better. Not just their equipment, but their formations, and then getting into their doctrine. For the U.S. Army, we've got FMS Web. That's a FUO, CAC access only type of resource. It's an excellent resource. Get into it and learn it if you're not familiar with it. That's all I'll say here. And then the internet. If all else fails, just Google it, right? All right, execution. 2 main formats you can use that I alluded to was either doing it together or kind of double blind. Together would be 2 people sitting at a table after they make their plans and be like, all right, man, here's my plan. Here's what I would do this hour. Here's what I would do this hour. And you're kind of adjudicating together. It could be a little simpler. It could be a little faster. It's got some value, but it also detracts in that you can't, it's hard to be completely unbiased on not taking into consideration the moves your opponent's doing because you see them, right? Even if your guys wouldn't be able to sense or know that person was there or doing that thing, you know it because you're doing it together. That's where the double blind format comes in, where you have a dedicated white cell. For most operations now, I generally act as the white cell, lead in the exercise, and then you got 2 participants, the red and the blue 4. They conduct their mission analysis on their own. They conduct their battle tracking in separate locations. So they have no idea what the other person's doing unless they sense them through a form of contact. The main adjudication thing I'll get to a little bit deals with battle damage assessment and form of contact. But continuing on with the flow of execution, it's generally hour by hour, half hour by half hour, or contact event by contact event. This helps keep the pace going. And it's of the manner where, They either go to the Blue Four or they come to me. I'm like, all right, what are you going to do this hour? I need to know very specifically your formation order of movement, your schemes, what posture, what weapon status, what you're prepping, where the gun tubes are laid, like what you are having that formation do, or what you expect your subordinate leaders to be doing in that situation. You don't necessarily be like, I want my fire team leaders to do this. No, man, you're not micromanaging. Like, what would you expect your fire team leader to do this? Or do you have any specific tactics, techniques, or procedures guidance you would give them over the radio, right? Once contact, especially direct contact, direct fire contact comes into play, you're really getting into, all right, we're going to slow this down and go by event. That's where we come by adjudication. And we're talking, you've got to determine the form of contact based off everything you know. That's visual form of contact, direct fires, indirect fires, audio, electric signal, CBurn, civilian, so on and so forth. Any type of potential form of contact. If you've got a UAS flying overhead, what's the probability of them seeing the dismounted forces under trees below them? You've got to figure that out. Um, then the battle damage assessment, especially for engagements. You know, how many are killed, how many wounded, what are the vehicle statuses? Is it mobility kill? Is it catastrophic? Is it nothing? So on and so forth. The adjudication. This has been constantly evolving over the past couple of years. And we really tried to take a balance of having an engine type of formulaic tool and then experience and judgment. I know a lot of other forces around the world throughout the past 20th century had initially, examples from other wargaming books, talked about, everybody tries to use a formulaic, but then they start, especially post conflicts, they start to use the combat experience and the judgment of those who've seen the battlefield, right? If you can get a good mix, a balance of those, you're probably on the right track and you're probably going to get the best value. As you can see in the lower left-hand side, I've got the log of what we used here for this most previous one in December. There would be a situation, directed to a type of engagement. Each of those types of engagements would have their own sheet in the further on Excel. There would be variable selections, as you can see in the right. There would be a simple letter going across the upper columns, such as A, B, C, D, E. And then we would use a dice roll, a 2 dice roll, to simulate the probability outcomes and the chaos of the battlefield. And here's the reason why. 2 dice do a really good job of creating a normal distribution curve to where the vast majority of outcomes are coming at 6, 7, 8, right? The 7 will come up, 16, 17% of the time. The 6 and the 8 each will come up respectively, 15%. A 2 or a 3 will only come up like 2%. Same as the 11 or 12, right? And you can skew whether an ambush, which you would say has a 90% chance of success, more towards something like that E, where closer to almost everything is a great outcome. But you always have the chaos of the battlefield, right? Maybe there's a little bit of terrain. Maybe the soldier sucks and he was sleeping. Maybe everything jammed. Maybe something, right? So that's what we've used for form of contacts, for indirect fire, for attack and defense, to help capture what should normally happen, generally expected outcomes, the chaos of the battlefield, and then that can always be trumped by experience and judgment to make sure we're getting the best outcomes as possible. The cons of a map exercise. there is some gaminess to it, and that's kind of prevented or introduced initial hesitation of buy-in by some of the guys on this. Right, you're using dice. It's got a bunch of assumptions. It's on a map or a PowerPoint. Like like, okay. Using PowerPoint is worse than just going pure analog maps. It can be quicker on PowerPoint, but the analog maps a little more realistic. Um, Hiding the way the dice come out generally could help, um, and really explaining in a prior introduction how this system is going down and what it's based off with doctrine and experience, um, really kind of helps them. And they got to kind of just accept whatever outcome comes in so the scenario keeps flowing. Unless they have a great point from their experience and judgment. Hey, this doesn't really jive with what should normally happen in this situation. And then we'll be like, okay, we'll adjudicate it that way. It's just a training event, right? The modeling of the chaos and the outcomes of the battle damage assessments and adjudication, it's not perfect, right? It's tough, and that can detract a little bit from it. Specific soldiers can have issues with this based off their ego, their laziness, or their aversion to conduct repetitions. You'll get some soldiers saying, "Nah, man, I'm good. I'm good with one rep or no reps." You may find that generally that's a good indicator that a soldier may not necessarily be as professional in the ownership of their craft. But I have found that there's a caveat to that. Soldiers with a lot of experience, a couple deployments who've done hundreds of missions, right? Dozens, hundreds of missions, lots of contact with the enemy. They have a more naturalistic decision making system. They may not necessarily formally jot down stuff or do the entire process on paper. It's like doing math problems in their head. They just have done it so much they're at a different level. Allowing the space for that has been kind of eye-opening to watch and pretty cool to see. And it really kind of got fleshed out more whenever I read and did the essay report on Something Rotten. Another plug for that. Go check that one out. And then the available time. Time is a con for this map exercise, for the preparation and execution. Let me explain this a little bit. It probably takes still, 3 to 5 hours to generate the scenario, to really give the guys a quality scenario, um, whether it's historically based or doctrinally force rate ratio based, finding good terrain, finding interesting um, possibilities to give them avenues of approach and options to make decisions, right? Um, Not just funneling them down into one frontal attack. Um, that takes time. Then once a issue their orders to them and they begin their mission analysis, like it literally could take 5 to 10 hours of work to prep for this mission. And I mean that in the sense of, for a lot of opportunity in this could be these guys are doing a new level of echelon above them where they've got a lot more attachments. So they might be doing this kind of operation for the first time, where they don't have their mission binder completely prepped immediately. And it's also an opportunity for them to practice, right? To get into the doctrine or to get into their systems, how they're going to battle track, how they're going to do this mission preparation, to get deep into the TLPs, to co-analysis and development, to take their time to make a good plan, to flesh it out, and to be prepared. That could take 5-10 hours. A lot of times, guys are doing, and this is kind of on the side of normal work generally, right? You can't dedicate this much time out of the normal battle rhythm for these guys to prep this. They've got to do it amongst all the other tasks and admin, overhead. The Army loves to do. Um, so generally, they don't get, or they don't always take 5 to 10 hours to prep for it, but they could, and they possibly very easily should. So me making sure I try to build in that time for them um, is important too. And then execution. Execution actually really takes 2 to 3 hours generally. Um, so we're always trying to make it a little bit faster, but it still takes a while. Then to do the AER at the end, quick hot wash, 15 minutes. And then the following week or so, where you formally do the TNDO or feedback on what guys and gals can improve by sitting down, developmental counseling style, or just hot wash AR style, whatever. That takes another half hour or so. It's kind of a significant training event, but not nearly, again, as significant as trying to do it on ground, live rounds, get range safety to bless off on everything, get all the units to coordinate and have their drills together, and so on and so forth. Still pretty quick, relatively speaking, in that sense. The next steps. So from here, I'm looking to try and, again, continue to refine the adjudication process, engine, whatever word you want to use for it. Ideally, within a browser, as a tool within a browser or an app for your phone. That way, you could do this off-site. Ideally, you're out there in the field. I mean, you still kind of can, but it'll be less efficient. Um, I think having it available and accessible uh, to more of the force, as opposed to by email or on some random website, um, just will help with sharing knowledge, ease of access, and all the cool things. But the real question, the bigger issue here, is a lot of leaders have espoused how important getting repetitions in wargaming, and this, by some definitions, is kind of a war game, how important this is. And I'm talking about, as in previous videos or books based off wargaming or how consequential it was during World War II. Like it's really important. Um, Wargaming can save lives. It really can. But here's the issue. It's still not an official, directed, specified task leader professional development event that's mandated for leaders to conduct. Maybe soldiers at West Point do it, maybe my guys do it, maybe somebody else does it, but those are just pockets. As an enterprise, as an institution, as a profession of arms, how serious are we about getting leaders repetitions? Whether it's the MAPEX, whether it's live or toots or radio rehearsals or CTC rotations, like the culmination of how experienced leaders are, especially coming out of 20 years of GWAT, where those opportunities may not exist until the next fight again. And the next fight could be just as interesting or more, right? I would like to see, and I hope to challenge and expect our leaders to demand this of us, of us junior leaders. Hopefully, I can continue to help. And again, to kind of wrap up, thanks for checking this out. This is a method, a way, a training methodology to add amongst everything else. This may be able to have some time efficiencies. Uh, it's not the only way, absolutely. And it absolutely isn't perfect yet either. Uh, But I appreciate you checking this out. Just wanted to share this method that we've been working on. All right, thank you. Have a good day.